tour debut. But it's going to be interesting to see in this online rapid format. How will he do? And here we go. The moves are coming out.
Here we go. It's a Sicilian defense. I'm not sure I expected this one, to be honest. Firstly, Rapport opening with the King's Pawn. Doesn't happen every day. And Magnus now reacting with the Sicilian. We're more used to seeing that, but it shows he's in a fighting mood. But to do that as black against such an aggressive player like Rapport comes with some risk entailed. So, okay, meanwhile, a closed Sicilian. We're used to seeing open Sicilians at this top level. The closed Sicilian maybe dropping out of fashion ever since the days of Spassky, the former world champion. And, okay, Magnus using a very provocative style in the opening. Look at black's rook on this left side of the board. It's already moved, and it's only moved 4 or 5. That is rare at this early stage. And Rapport stops the advance of black's pawns on this left side just by pushing his own pawn forward 1 square. I must admit, it's nice to see Rapport dressed in the Champions Chess Tour hoodie, in the jacket there. It shows he's really, really embracing this tournament, and he wants to make his mark.
Yeah, and getting into the spirit of things, I feel. And Magnus really playing very ambitious chess, because if this works out for him, he will have an excellent version of the traditional lines that you play against the closed Sicilian. Because normally, you know, you do get this left side pawn advance, but you kind of don't get it in this particular way.
You have to work for it.
Exactly, you have to work for it a little bit harder, and also you have to determine where your pieces on the right side of the board are going to go. Here, Magnus is trying to be a maximalist. He's trying to get everything he wants, and I'm kind of curious, because I must admit, this was one of my favourite openings when I was younger. And, OK, here comes the quirkiness, here comes the madness, because now we have a move that's never been seen before. Surprise, surprise. And it's initiating chaos.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's only move 6, and they're in a brand new position already. Both players freestyling. Rapport, he's known for this. He's super creative. He's actually got a very classical upbringing in Hungary. They always teach players the basics. They look at the world champions. They look at all the classic games. But he used that classical training to kind of inspire his creative juices, his creative style. And that's why pushing pawns on this left side, both of them now have created maximum tension. And finally, white's knight comes in. Yeah. And I think we'll see white castle over the next move or two. OK, he does that now. Yeah. So white is the first to get ready, and we call this the close Sicilian, but it might well open up later. At the moment, no pawn trades, no piece trades. That's why it's a close Sicilian. But we might well see white try and explode things open before black is ready.
Yeah. You know, you mentioned that Richard is from Hungary, and I don't know, immediately I thought back to this conversation I had on a bus, a very long bus ride I had with Peter Lecko, and he was telling me all about the Hungarian school of chess. And it works like this. He says, every Hungarian has their openings very nicely worked out. And if you play perfectly, then it's a draw. Because, you know, everyone played... It doesn't matter who you're playing against, whether they're much lower rated than you or higher rated than you. They play perfect opening, draw. However, if you play in inaccuracy in the opening, then the Hungarian school of chess says, doesn't matter your rating, whether it's 2,700 or lower than rating, we play. We play, you know, because you made a mistake.
Yeah.
And he's really bucked the trend of Hungarian players, Richard Rapport. He's far more creative than other players, I guess, in his generation out there in Hungary. And yeah, he's really gone his own way, both in terms of career as well, maybe not playing the tournaments he was expected to, and maybe not, I mean, now he doesn't live in Hungary, but just maybe not following the expected route. Either way, he's made it now to the top of world chess, about to qualify for the candidates. And meanwhile, Magnus playing a move, he's got ready to castle his king. And yeah, really tense position right now. I'm used to seeing close Sicilians, Ivanka, where white just actually develops normally, doesn't commit on the queen side, and then actually wants to play an attack against the black king. And you mentioned you played this when you were young. This was one of your main openings, and I know that was the case for a lot of younger players. They start with this, right, because the plans are quite straightforward, quite thematic. What do you think of this one, using your experience there?
Yeah, this one is quite flexible. I'm not quite sure I like it. because the plan that I was kind of taught was quite thematic and quite almost by rote, which was like, develop your dark square bishop, trade off your opponent's dark squares, and then, and only then, push forward with these type of pawn moves. If you're going to do these type of pawn moves, you try to be maximalist about it. You go the whole shebang with on the rights, just push every pawn you can there. And one thing that every single captain that I've ever trained me during those years, they hated me playing this particular opening with the white pieces because they were like, look at your light squared bishop. It's so bad. That is the definition of a bad bishop. And I would go, yeah, but I'm not playing anything else. So well, we're going to have to make do here. And they often grimaced when they looked at my positions, but it didn't matter because when you play these positions out, you get a feel for them. And here, Richard is actually doing all the things that you should be doing. He's taking he's bringing the knight into the centre. This is also another kind of standard idea that you get. And it's also a consequence of Magnus actually retreating his knight.
Yeah, and finally, belatedly, Magnus does castle. And I'm expecting Richard here to try and trade off these dark squared bishops. There we go.
Which is done, but via an unusual way.
Really unusual. Usually, you mentioned, Jovanka, the plan is to actually bring the bishop to the king side and exchange black's bishop there. But once black's dark squared bishop in front of the black king disappears, there might be holes around that black king. There might be some targets for Richard to aim at later. So really interesting strategy. There was actually a big threat in the position earlier as well with these pawn pushers to push everything forward in the centre with white. But Richard, he's taken a slower approach now, and he'll wait before pushing more pawns forward. OK, there Magnus goes. Those dark square bishops do come off. Yeah.
All right.
Neutral fianchetto, and that's been neutralised for both sides.
And 52 minutes left in the auction to bid for our charity chess cup. Yes.
Oh, and I have to say one thing about this cup. As a tea drinker, I really appreciate that this is really good quality.
It really is high quality.
It has a very thin top to it, and it feels... Okay, anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a really good cup, basically.
It definitely is. It's great quality. It's homemade. And the design on the one that is up for auction is with a beautiful knight. Homemade by a fantastic designer in Oslo. And 92 is the current bid on this cup. 51 minutes left, so head into cctauction.com to make your bid. All the money, of course, go to the fundraiser for UNICEF.
Yeah, everything tastes better when there's a chess piece on the side, right?
Yeah.
There we go.
Yes.
And meanwhile as well, Kai, you mentioned the fianchetto. 2 bishops that were fianchettoed have been traded off, but look at the remaining bishops. They're both fianchettoed as well, both on the longest diagonal, those light squared bishops now. There's a few pieces in the way, but they're kind of staring off against each other. And I must admit, this mysterious move there by Richard Rapport, tucking his king in the corner, usually that's a safe-ish idea, but here it stands on the same diagonal as the black bishop, so slightly surprising. Also, there was no real danger against the white king. The white knights were really close. They're great defenders. So it feels as if Richard, he's just kind of waiting and seeing what plan Magnus goes for.
I wondered whether he has aggressive intentions, and I'm thinking, he's pushed 2 pawns up to the 4th row. Why not have a third join it?
Throw all the pawns forward towards the black king.
And by moving his king into the edge of the board, maybe he's getting ready for a rook to move across and maybe potentially threaten something along the G line.
Yep. Possibly. It's a long way away. I can't imagine Black's king being in too much danger yet, but it does lack defenders, I guess. So possibly, as you mentioned, White's rook sliding to the square the White king has evacuated, and then throwing pawns towards the Black king. I think Richard is just kind of... He's not spending too much time on the clock. He wants to save that time for later. He's just staying super flexible.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, it's not clear what Magnus does, because this tension on the left side of the board, I don't think either side wants to release that tension. No matter how you trade, you kind of give your opponent a bit more space. And, OK, Magnus, rubbing his eyes there.
Maybe. He does that sometimes. Is that a sign of something? Some calculation or something like that?
Possibly.
Tiredness.
Maybe tiredness. It tends to be in positions where he's not kind of feeling too energetic as well. Here, Richard's kind of blocked it up. There's only been a trade of 1 set of bishops. So it's hard to find a plan for Black. And even any plan you go for doesn't necessarily improve your position, might just lead to some trades.
Well, one plan that they always did against me in this particular position was actually to pick up the f7 pawn and move it 2 squares forward, just to potentially block up any kingside expansion. And Magnus has decided just to maneuver and improve his knight. So still very tense, very exciting stuff.
Yep, very exciting stuff. And moving the knights, the black knights now off to this left side of the board. Yes, they've got some intentions maybe to continue jumping forward, maybe to support some black pawn pushes on this side, but the black king now completely bereft of any defenders. So for me, a signal of the opponent moving the knights away from their king means we should go for the attack. And man, now your ideas, Jovanka, much more tempting than before.
I don't think you've ever said that about my pawn pushes.
I've got commitment issues, I admit that openly. I don't want to push pawns.
You're normally like, steady on. And maybe this approach, I'm like, yeah, okay, I like your approach too.
Yeah. I don't normally want to push pawns because I'm aware of all the weaknesses they leave behind, but here it's just too tempting. And just to show one of your ideas, Jovanka, one of them is to push this pawn forward, right? Maybe once this pawn goes forward, later on to shuffle the rook across onto the same line as the enemy king. And it doesn't look like much, but black's king will feel a bit uncomfortable. And the other way would be to be even more direct and just push forward and try to open some lines immediately, open this line for the rook. I'm not sure I would go for this yet, just because it gives black maybe some control of dark squares in the center. And talking of dark squares, Richard decides, okay, it's not yet time to throw this pawn forward or this pawn forward. Instead, he just covers those dark squares. This is very logical as well. Once you've traded off dark squared bishops, you might as well put your pawns on dark squares. You need some influence on that color complex. And he's also supporting central pawn push. And Kaya, you like your pawn structures. If black just makes a kind of slow move, white is going to push forward with this pawn. And suddenly, there's a lot of pawns on the 4th rank marking their territory. And imagine if black closes things down, we could well see a pawn storm. 4 pawns, the mean girls marching forward. And white just gaining space. Black will have to worry about all of these ideas.
We haven't seen them in a while.
No, we haven't seen them in a while. And I got really, really excited because the rook that was looking like it wasn't doing a single thing on b2 can suddenly swing across. It's become a roving rook.
Yeah, or a swinging rook, as Simon Williams told us in the last show. So this rook, as mentioned, it was doing nothing over here, but suddenly if black just doesn't do too much, suddenly if these pieces clear out the way, the rook could swing the whole way across to the other side of the board, could team up with its other rook, and later on, if this line becomes open, these 2 rooks might well be some of the deciding factors. So, okay, Magnus, he is not ready to sit passively and wait for the white pawns to advance. He's doing the same himself, and he's trying to create his own version. There's only 3 of them, but he's trying to create his own version of the pawn storm, and that is a pawn sacrifice. He's allowing this pawn to drop, attacking the black knight at the same time, but his idea is that the knight can cause a double attack. And jumping to the edge of the board, not normally recommended, but here it does threaten the white rook, and once the rook moves, it will drop back and capture this pawn. So I don't think Richard Rapport wants to lose time in this manner. Really interesting play. It's all about the pawns right now. There've been a trade of bishops, but all of the pawns still live. And what to do? Do you take? Do you block? Richard Rapport with a huge decision. If he blocks, it will become a slower game. White will be committed to going for an attack against the black king, but you just completely abandon the center. Black can continue pushing forward himself, maybe. But if you capture, then suddenly things might open up. And the more things open up, for example, pawn takes, the more maybe your king will feel vulnerable on this diagonal.
Yeah, I feel like capturing is just taboo. You don't do it. You're either going to reinforce the center or you're going to go forward with your pawn. And going forward with a pawn, I admit, has its downsides. But then again, one maybe can get an active knight. Yeah,
it looks nice at least. We talked about pawn chains. This is a nice pawn chain. This is a nice pawn chain. It's just maybe too tempting. All of White's pawns now on dark squares. It's almost as if he's playing checkers. And Richard Rapport, he's very artistic. That's the one thing about him. He's one of the most artistic players out there. He loves these kind of little pretty patterns, these little nuances. So I'm expecting as well, Jovanka, as you mentioned, just block things up and maybe this active knight you also referenced, bringing the knight towards the black king and trying to plant it into a weak dark square. This would be really controversial. It would be really ambitious for Richard Rapport, but he is that type of player.
And I have a message for you, David.
Hey.
So you know Ty, our fantastic stats guy sitting in, it's not Washington, some state in the US, running all our stats with his computers. And he's saying that if Richard Rapport wins this game, he's going to be up to 2,803.
Wow.
On the tour ratings, he's going to pass 2,800.
Yeah.
Okay,
But
Magnus.
But he has a big obstacle.
Yep.
He has to beat the world champion himself.
But the bar is on his side.
The bar is... yeah, easier said than done. But yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
28.03.
So he will be the second player then to reach 2,800. Magnus Carlsen is, of course, way above 2,800. Is it 2,860 something?
Yeah, 2850-ish,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, and Richard, I mean, I guess in order to become the king, you've got to beat the king. So in order to get 2,800 now, he needs to beat the only other 2,800 player on the tour at the moment.
And what chances do you give Richard Rapport? 96% chance to qualify for the candidates through the Grand Prix. And if and when he plays, what chances do you give him to qualify for the match?
I think he will start as one of the underdogs, but I think he'll like that. There's less. He always prefers playing with less pressure on him, Richard. And it does feel like maybe at the top level, he's one of the least experienced. I mean, he's now in his mid-20s, and he hasn't played that many elite events compared to some of the others. For example, there will be players in the candidates who have played World Championship matches before, and he hasn't quite been there. Meanwhile, he does block it up. Look at all those white pawns on dark squares now. That's aesthetically at least pleasing. But Richard, he's also the kind of guy who can beat anyone on his day. And
one of the interesting things about Richard is that, unlike the other top players, he doesn't have a team behind him. Yeah. He's just, he has his great support from his wife, Yavana.
Very strong player
definitely. But really, there's no other teams to help him. He doesn't have any seconds. He does a lot of his work by himself.
Yeah, he's a lone wolf, but that does mean that he knows all his strengths and weaknesses inside out, and he can be true to his own preferences. A lot of top players, as we saw in the World Championship match in Nepomniachtchi there, he ended up playing openings that his seconds recommended, but it didn't really suit his style. So, yeah, Richard, very much an individual player, and he embraces that, and it's worked well for him, at least in the last couple of years. Meanwhile, a couple of moves. Black did try and fight for space in the centre. White's knight has now gone towards that black king. But after a knight jump by black, White's rook was under fire, so it had to take a timeout to defend itself. So, yeah, it's unclear who looks happier with their position. It's just that tense.
Yeah.
This one, the evaluation bar says 0.0. It's still very, very wild, this position, and chances for both sides.
Yeah, I really do like this type of position because, yes, black is absolutely dominating there on the left side of the board, no question. You know, White is going to go all in with an attack against the king. And as we say in chess, checkmate ends the game. So definitely the stakes are high. And of course, it's an exciting game. And we still want to be really enthusiastic about the chess. So please, everyone, tweet us using the hashtag ChessChamps. Tweet us your move suggestions. Tweet us your comments. And of course, as always, we love, love, love to see your selfies. So remember, tweet us using the hashtag and we will feature them on the show. Hashtag ChessChamps.
And I'm struggling to find a move here from Magnus. Maybe he has to open things up. Maybe he has to trade off some pawns, because I'm getting scared. After you mentioned the word checkmate, Jovanka, I'm getting scared that the black king has just been abandoned to its fate, and White's knight, as we mentioned, is about to jump in with some nasty checks. It needs some backup, but if Richard is able to arrange backup for this white knight on this side of the board, then it's looking scary for Magnus. And also, remember, Magnus has already lost 2 games in the prelim stage. The ghosts of those defeats might make him a bit worried here. He lost the last game to David Navarra through a checkmating attack. Every time we see him lose, I think, on the tour this season, last season, it tends to be either through a blunder or by getting checkmated. Magnus, sometimes he does underestimate the safety of his own king. So maybe Richard is playing with that in mind. And definitely no fear from the Hungarian so far.
No fear.
Yeah.
But, I'm also tempted, if I were Magnus, to actually just step forward with a pawn and push it 1 square and just kind of kill anything that's going to happen on the left side of the board. Just cut the board in 2 and then say, you want to attack me? bring it on.
And okay, he doesn't go for this. As you mentioned, Jovanka, now this rook is eternally locked out of the game. This is a real thorn in White's side, really far advanced down the board. But then again, White would have ideas of just jumping in and checking this black king. And it's very much black controlling the left side, White controlling the right side. Instead, Magnus deciding, okay, this one is too blocked, too locked up. And actually, block positions, Rapport does tend to thrive, just because he's able to use his creativity with the maneuvers. So Magnus instead opens things up. So he's trying to angle for a potential queen trade. Now, if White takes back with his pawn, I think we'll see Magnus love to trade the queens at some point, maybe even now. And after a recapture, just try to exchange the rooks too. And at least things would open up and it's more clear what Black's plan is. Then again, Richard, if he's feeling super ambitious, maybe we'll see a sacrifice he could take with a knight. He could just abandon his pawns on this side of the board. And instead of capturing back now these pawns, because Black's knight is defending it, he's going for it. He's going for the attack. Now, I was going to say, White's knight can jump in and look at these two white knights. Together, they are aiming towards this black king. And this black king, remember, no defenders around it. But I'm pretty sure computers are going to hate this. They'll find a way to defend, and Black can just win a pawn here. So what is Magnus Carlsen going to do? Is he going to get scared of this attack? Are you scared of it, Jovanka?
Yes.
I am as well. So.
Yeah, I mean, just forget about the computer assessment. You know, computers play perfect chess, but you can definitely see along the horizon that a knight will find itself on this beautiful outpost on the f6 square. And if the white queen joins in the game and joins in the attack, you know, she finds herself mysteriously on the h6 square, for instance.
If she could somehow break through to the black king. Then
that's it. It's curtains. So...
Yeah, so Richard, he's basically abandoning this whole left side of the board, abandoning some pawns, maybe even a piece later on. He's just going to go for this black king. He's got a one-track mind right now, and that's scary for Magnus. It's always scary when your opponent just doesn't care and they only want to checkmate you. So, yeah, let's go back to the players, because in this current position, Magnus is about to go a pawn up. He's going to capture this pawn, but Richard is going to throw everything towards this black king. Really, really complicated stuff. And of the two players, suddenly it's Richard who looks more confident of the two. And, OK, Magnus does indeed grab a pawn.
Yeah, and we're going to see it, aren't we? And
here we are.
Yeah. Woo-hoo-hoo. And at this point of suspense, OK, he has gone for it. OK, oh, my God. This is like a typical kind of Bobby Fischer type of attack. You know, Bobby doesn't care about the left side of the board. He's going all in for the checkmate.
Yeah, and this is the type of position, as you mentioned, we would have seen 50 years ago, maybe 100 years ago, where we would praise the fearlessness, the romanticism of the attacking player, just giving up the whole left side, going for the opponent's king. But in modern chess, defenders are usually favoured by the computer. So we have seen attacks in the past that just look fantastic, but they don't really work unless your opponent maybe does make a mistake. And I think that's what Richard Rapport has to rely upon now. Magnus, the computer thinks he's doing well, but wow, such a calm move. Just pushing a pawn forward one square. He wants to use this rook on the second rank, maybe, Jovanka, as you mentioned. That white rook on the a2 square maybe wants to swing across and help the attack.
Yeah.
To me, it's a surprising change of pace. It just looks really slow. You've said A, going for the attack. You might as well say B and continue throwing knights towards the black king.
Yeah.
But he's taken a timeout.
Yeah. And I was going to use a word that I know Simon, our good friend, Ginger GM, uses all the time. He says it's a discombobulating move. Confusing.
And talking of discombobulation, these black knights are really confusing me, and I'm pretty sure they're confusing Rapport, because Magnus, one of his knights was attacked. He just left it en prise, as we say. He left it attacked. The other black knight has joined the action, and look at that white rook on the a2 square. Where's it going to run to? It's hit now by one of the black knights. Oof. Suddenly I'm thinking that rook doesn't have too many escape squares. That black knight as well that has just moved, hitting white's pawn in the centre of the board. I think Rapport's last move just lost all momentum. And we were praising his fearlessness, but maybe it's backfired already at this early stage.
Yeah, because in the cold light of the day, black does have a pawn on the a3 square, 2 squares away from queening. You know, that can slow white's attack down a little bit.
Yeah, this pawn, you have to keep an eye on it. You have to keep at least one piece sidelined, stopping it. And as mentioned, this last knight jump by Magnus, planting his knight on this square, hits the white rook. And I'm going to sneeze.
Oh, no.
Hits this white rook, and it hits this white pawn in the centre of the board. That's a double attack. And just
Yeah.
really struggling. You can't defend them both.
And also one way of that black can neutralize white's potential attack is also to maybe go bishop takes knight
Yeah.
at the right time.
So, for example, if this rook moves,
Exactly.
I mean, firstly, you can just capture this pawn, maybe
Yeah.
even with your queen. But as you mentioned, Ivanka, you can at least get rid of one potential attacker by capturing in the center.
And one knight shouldn't really scare you.
No, it isn't one knight, it's two knights at least temporarily for Rapport, and he's jumped in with a check. I'm expecting to see the king step forward. If you step into the corner, then it's more likely you'll actually get checkmated on the side of the board. For example, as we mentioned, if the queen comes in and tries to go for your king, at least as Magnus has done, at least with the king here, you could maybe use your rook to defend in the corner. You could maybe even just push a pawn forward and keep things nice and safe. It still takes white 4 or 5 moves to actually create a big threat. And meanwhile, maybe you don't have that luxury of 4 or 5 moves. Your rook is attacked while Rapport just gambling, giving away everything. He's decided it's not worth saving this rook. It's not worth saving this pawn. He's just brought his queen in. And, OK, it's the last chance for him. The computer shows this doesn't work, but is Magnus going to call his bluff? If Magnus takes this rook, what is his idea?
I think his idea is simply to get a perpetual check. And he wants to just retreat his knight, give a check. King steps back to wherever it goes. And then the knight can jump in again. And you're like, hey, do you remember that checkmating idea? It's kind of renewed.
Yeah, so maybe a checkmate in 2 idea here for white. I don't know if black can stop this. In the current position, though, black doesn't have to take this rook yet. Maybe it's not running away. Another move you could consider is jumping in with this knight with what we call a family fork. It's not just hitting the queen. It's not just hitting the rook. It's also hitting this bishop. It's not just a double attack. It's kind of a triple attack. And the reason I'm suggesting this is because now, Ivanka, if the queen moves, because she's under fire, then, for example, if black just pushes a pawn, there are ideas of the knight coming back as a defender.
That is a nasty move, David. That wasn't the knight you're meant to touch. You're meant to touch the other knight and go on some adventure on the left side, not get back to the defense of the king.
Yeah, so now this knight, I mean, both rooks under attack from the black knights. It does look like it's just too much. I don't think white is quick enough. It looks scary with the white queen and white knight super near the black king, but it's just not quite breaking through. So Magnus here, if he's calm, if he calculates correctly, he'll see that he is winning. But you never know. OK, he does find this move, multi-purpose move. And it looks like the world champion is going to take this one. The attack just too slow for Rapport.
Yeah.
And 30 minutes left now, 31 minutes left in the auction for the Knight Coffee Cup. And I have news for you guys, because we're now going to put in 2 for 1 in that auction. We'll have the very nice Knight Coffee Cup, and we're also going to put in an extra cup that all 3 of us will sign.
Yeah.
And the current bid is $100, and there is 31 minutes left to make your bid on cctauction.com. Yeah.
I'm tempted to bid myself now. They are very nice cups.
Yeah,
They are certainly, and signed by us as well.
Yep.
So definitely, and you have to remember that every single penny that is generated by these cups goes to UNICEF.
Yep, absolutely. So yesterday's $1,100 for the chest tie is just great money going to UNICEF. And now the bar just all the way over to Magnus Carlsen's side in this game. Is there any hope for Richard Rapport, or is his only hope some sort of a blunder for Magnus?
He has to hope for maybe a blunder or a mouse slip. Blunders are possible, especially when you're on the defending side, when your king is the more vulnerable of the two. It's possible to make mistakes. You could underestimate a check. You could underestimate maybe a potential sacrifice to break through to your king. But here, with enough time on his clock, with 5 minutes, it feels like Magnus isn't going to slip. He's played perfectly in the defensive phase so far. He's kind of mixed attack with defense, Magnus. He's gone on the attack on this left side of the board, with his knights especially, grabbing a couple of pawns in the process, and now he's gone a bit on the defensive. He's put the black king on a good square, and now the black knight is going to just jump back as a potential defender. So, yeah, it's looking difficult. Rapport lifting his queen up 1 square. Ooh, maybe a bit tricky there. Maybe some ideas in mind, as Ivanka mentioned, of the white knight dropping back with a check. But the other move you mentioned, the defensive resource, will end this game, because one of white's pride and joys, those knights, it has been removed. Now white only has 2 potential attackers, the queen and knight, and faced with several defenders, it's not going to be enough. Magnus just ruthless, and
Yeah.
I think that's the clincher, this move, because there were some threats actually, but Magnus had calculated ahead and foreseen those threats.
He just followed the rules, right? I mean, I'm sure Magnus calculated it all, but he was kind of aided by the rule that, you know, when you're in danger, trade off your opponent's attackers. And you have to remember 3 is the magic number, and there were 3 potential attackers brewing. And Richard, unfortunately, had to take a timeout to capture the bishop. And Queen and Knight is not going to be sufficient.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, White, for example, can step back with his knight and give check, but it's only going to be 1 check, really. And Magnus here actually has a choice on the menu. Which rook do you capture? Both of your black knights have a choice of rook. What would you go for, Jovanka? Or would you just kind of be really cold-blooded and just not capture either rook? Because you can maybe capture the next move.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. You have your choice for a feast. So, you know, those rooks are... leave them be, and instead probably take time out just to clarify the danger, potential danger around the king.
Yeah.
How to do that? Haven't quite figured out how to do that. Well, maybe there might be some kind of pesky, perpetual idea, is there? Knight checking and then going back and then threatening checkmate.
Let's try and show this just while Magnus tries to figure out the final touches. Maybe we can keep an eye on the players because we might see a reaction any moment now. White's rook has indeed dropped, and this rook is attacked as well. Jovanka mentioned a check, but the problem is the king hides in the corner. And, OK, this is going to happen. No more checks. And also there's tension between the queens. So White's knight, I think, is going to jump back to where it came from, threatening to deliver a checkmate. But maybe Black can deal with this in a few ways. And one of them I see is just to bring the rook across and act as a defender. Now White's queen and knight actually teaming up, threatening checkmate on this square, but Black can just defend with his rook. And I think we're going to see this. This rook acting as a defender might just end the game. Richard might well resign here because he's simply a rook down and another rook attacked. And let's go back to the players. Will we see a result after this last move? This rook move, using the rook as a defender, will end the game. Just not enough attacking pieces left. Richard now, he's down a rook and he's down 2 pawns, and there we go. He does resign.
Wow, he resigns after 29 moves.